So I'm a retired lieutenant with the New York City Fire Department. I retired 3 years after the collapse of the Twin Towers because of my injuries. And I mean, I'm gonna like give you what we back in Brooklyn we call it the nickel version. So I'm gonna go New York on you. Uh, my story kind of is like a very interesting, probably one of the most ironic stories anybody ever heard. And whoever hears it wants to hear it 100 more times. And for somebody that hasn't heard it and finds out about it, they're disappointed that I didn't tell them the story. So what happened was in January of 2001, I was in my office in headquarters, and I got a phone call from a company called Fisher Price Toys, and I thought they had the wrong phone number. They says, "No, we don't have the wrong number. We want to speak to Lieutenant Torrillo." I said, "Well, that's me. How can I help you?" I thought maybe they opened up a new office in Manhattan. They wanted me to go there and like host fire drills for the employees. They said, "No, no, it's got nothing to do with that." They said, "We want to run something by you. You might be interested in. Do you have some time to speak?" So I said, "It's 9 o'clock and I work till 6 o'clock. Can you speak for 9 hours? What do you got? Shoot, give it to me." They said, "Are you familiar with the Fisher Price Corporation?" I said, "I think it's a household name in this country." They said, "No, more particularly, do you know anything about our little action figures we call rescue heroes that kids love?" Truthfully, no. Well, let us tell you about it. We have a whole little line of action figures called Rescue Heroes, a little police officer called Jake Justice, his partner, who's a canine officer, Bill Barker, their boss, Sergeant Cyrene, his boss, Captain Cuffs, an ambulance attendant called Perry Medic, a lifeguard called Sandy Beach, a construction worker called Jack Hammer, a mountain climber called Cliff Hanger, and his partner, Rocky Canyon. And we have a medevac pilot by the name of Hal E. Copter. We have a scuba diver called Gil Gripper, an astronaut called Roger Houston, a ski patroller called Al Pine. We have also a female firefighter called Wendy Waters, but we want a New York City firefighter to be in addition to our rescue heroes. We're going to call them Billy Blazes. If you help us design it, we'll give you $1 for every one sold around the world. And that money was going to go into the education program that I was running for the New York City Fire Department. I would go out 7 days a week, and I was kind of like a disciple on fire prevention and survival. It was a way of drawing people into my audience if I gave them a free smoke detector. So that's what that kind of funding was helping me with. So in January 2001, I sat down with the Fisher Price executives, the artists, illustrators, and toy designers. And for a whole day in my office, as I'm speaking about what a firefighter looks like with his firefighting clothing that we call bunker gear, his air pack and his tools and his equipment, the artists and illustrators and toy designers had art pairs on easels with crayons and markers. And as I'm speaking, they're drawing. And at the end of the day, they have this new action figure. Billy Blaze is a likeness of a New York City firefighter. They took the artwork and went to the factory, and from January to July 2001, for that 6-month period, it took them that long to make the first mold and prototype. So in the first week of July of 2001, they called us up. They said, "Hey, we got the mold and the prototype. We want you to look it over before it goes into mass production." I set up another meeting in my office in fire department headquarters with my bosses, and we looked it over, and there were certain things that we thought they should kind of change and tweak a little bit if, in fact, he was going to be a signature New York City firefighter. So one of the executives, a woman by the name of Lori Oravec, who I had developed a nice friendship with over the 6-month project, she says, "Joe, tell me some things that are signature about a New York City firefighter." I says, "Well, we have big mustaches and we smoke cigars." She says, "Well, we're not going to put a cigar in Billy Blaze's hand." So she took out a black Sharpie and she drew a big mustache on Billy Blaze's. And she says, "Joey needs to look more like you." And they remolded Billy Blaze's, which took about 3 weeks with the big mustache. Now it's the end of July 2001. They call up another meeting for us to look it over once again. And this time we agreed on going to mass production. They were really excited. I was acting excited. I didn't think this was really that big of a deal, but we were going to get funding from it. So they said, "Okay, we want to have a big press conference in New York City. Where can we have a press conference?" Well, the year before, I had designed a learning center for kids for fire safety and fire prevention and survival, and we won the Theo Award at the Emmys the year before. We opened in October 2000, so this was almost a year later. I said, "Let's do the press conference at the Fire Zone." They said, "What's the Fire Zone?" "It's a new children's learning center I co-designed. We opened last year. We won a huge award. It's in the heart of Manhattan in Rockefeller Center." They said, "Oh my God, how apropos, can we really do it there?" I said, "Yeah, I'm the director." They says, oh my God, this is getting better and better. We're going to introduce the new rescue here at the new Children's Learning Center. They said, okay, we know where we're going to do it, but when? Well, this was the end of July of 2001. I said, let's do it in October. They says, okay, why October? I said, October is Fire Prevention Month. It's the longest running health initiative in the world, which is a fact. It goes back to 1871 after the big Chicago fire. Every October since, they used that month to heighten the awareness of preventing fires because of what happened in Chicago when supposedly Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked over a lantern in a barn and it set half of Chicago on fire. I don't know whether that's a true story, but according to folklore, it's entertaining. So they says, okay, they says, but that's too close to Christmas and the holiday season. We like the idea, but we got to get Billy Blaze on the mark a little bit sooner. So October was too distant. This was the end of July 2001 in the meeting. And I was kind of brainstorming. I couldn't think of another date in between that would be appropriate. And I said, 911 is an emergency phone number in New York City when you need help from an ambulance, a fire department, or the police department. Why don't we, for the first time, have a 911 themed safety day? Talk about ways to both prevent and survive fires and introduce the new rescue hero. And they says, oh my God, that's a great novel idea. So on 911, September 11, 2001, at 9 o'clock in the morning, every TV station was waiting for me in Rockefeller Center to introduce a new rescue hero, Billy Blaze, the New York City firefighter. Well, I got to my office about 6 o'clock that morning. I wanted to catch up on typical office work, emails, voicemails, scheduling, payroll. I had 3 college kids that were coming to the press conference with me. They were going to help me set up the press conference. They were in a special program to become firefighters. They went to the city university, but volunteered 2 days a week in the fire department. And so they were sitting in the conference room next to my office in headquarters, and they had the TV on. They having their breakfast in the morning. And I got out of my office. I went to the conference room, and, I said to the kids, hey, guys, come on, get your book bags. I'm kind of running late. It's already 20 to 9. I should have been there already. I went back into my office, and I grabbed my dress uniform. I shut off my computer, grabbed my wallet, my car keys, and one of the college kids came running out of the conference room into my office, and he had this frightened look on his face. His name was Joe, like me. And he's looking at me. I said, Joe, is everything okay? He says, a plane just hit the World Trade Center. What? He said, a plane just hit the World Trade Center. I said, you got to be kidding me. He says, no, I swear to God, it's on the TV in the conference room. I went back into the conference room, and sure enough, the morning shows were interrupted, and you see smoke coming out of the North Tower. So I said, Joe, is this a simulation? Is this a movie? Is this a docu? What is this, a joke? No, I swear to God, this really just happened. So now I'm thinking every emergency vehicle is going to be rushing to the scene. If I don't get out of headquarters now, I'm going to get stuck in traffic. The TV stations, the newspaper reporters, the mayor's going to be waiting for me. My boss is already there. She's going to kill me. I worked for a woman by the name of Lynn Tierney. She was a great woman to work for, but she didn't tolerate stupidity. And I'm sweating. I'm like, I got to get there. Says, guys, hurry up. We got in the elevator. We went to the underground garage in headquarters. We got in my car, and we zoomed out of headquarters. And 2 blocks away, we were already on the Brooklyn Bridge from Brooklyn going into Manhattan. And as I'm driving, speeding over the bridge, by the time I get to the Manhattan side, I'm looking to the left, and I can see about 10 floors of fire on the top of the North Tower. And originally I thought it was a little Piper Cup, so I didn't think it was such a big deal. Now, I had started my career in that firehouse across the street from the World Trade Center, but I left there in 1996 when I got promoted to lieutenant. So I'm thinking about all the guys in that firehouse. They were all my friends. I was there the night before September 11th. I went there to see the guys to say hello because I hadn't been there in a while. And so I'm thinking they're going to be the first ones in the building. They're going to need as much help as they can from somebody like me who spent 15 years in that firehouse protecting those towers. So I got to make an impromptu decision once I got to the Manhattan side of the bridge. Do I make a right and go to the press conference, or do I make a left and go to my original firehouse? And of course I said, the heck with Billy Blazes. This ain't happening today. I made a left and I got to my old firehouse. I parked the car on the sidewalk behind the firehouse so that we wouldn't block ambulances coming to and from the scene. And me and the 3 college kids ran around the corner to the front of the firehouse, and both of the firehouse doors were wide open, but both fire engines had already responded before we were there. And I go to run into the firehouse with the doors open, but I still can't get in because people from the area are laying all over the floor of the firehouse. They had been hit with jet fuel, pieces of the building. They started running, saw a firehouse with the doors open, looking for a haven of safety, trampled each other. Some people were screaming, some were crying, some were in shock. shocked, some were bleeding, some had torn clothes. And I looked at all these people on the floor of the firehouse. Nobody was in critical condition, but the 3 college kids had become emergency medical technicians in the program we were running for them. So I said, treat these people as best as you can. If they need to get to hospitals, get on the phone and call ambulances. I says, I'll be back later. I don't know when I'll be back. I might never be back again, but don't leave the firehouse. And I took off my dress uniform, and I borrowed a set of firefighting clothing from another fireman who was off duty, Tommy McNamara. We all leave our equipment in the firehouse, when we were off duty. So I grabbed his helmet, his jacket, his boots, his gloves, his pants, and I ran out of the firehouse to the North Tower. But I had to pass the South Tower to get to the North Tower. And as I'm passing the South Tower, it's now 9:03, which just happened to be my lucky number for some reason. And I hear a roar, and I look up, and the second jet came right over my head. I was underneath United Airlines Flight 175. I'm underneath it. It hits the South Tower and just disappears like a magic act. It almost looked as if the tower sucked the jet inside, and where's this jet? And this huge fireball came down right at me. I turned and I made it back into the firehouse, and a huge fireball exploded on the street. I would have been killed right there. And I told the kids, and I told everybody at that point, I said, hey, we're under a terrorist attack, because I was there for the bombing in 1993, and we were told that they would come back again one day and try it again. And 8 years later, on 9/11, they did. I said, everybody on the top of the towers are going to die, so we're not going to get to them, and they're not getting down. And then at that point, I said, these buildings are going to collapse. And people said, what? I said, these buildings are going to collapse. And people said, you got to be kidding me. How is that possible? I said, these buildings will collapse. Trust me when I tell you. And so many years later, as I travel around the world telling the story, because I'm a keynote speaker, and people ask me, what made you say that? Well, nobody knew before I worked for the fire department. I went to school for architecture and engineering. And 2 of my professors in architecture school were working for the concrete contractor on the Twin Towers. And they could take us down to the towers when they were going up on a school trip to study this new lightweight steel novel design. And so on 9/11, all those memories came back to me. I'm looking at the towers like I'm Superman, looking through them and remembering the steel support system. And for me, not so much as a firefighter, but more as somebody who was an engineering student, it was so obvious that these buildings would not withstand that amount of structural damage and heat, and that they were doomed to collapse, and that we had to get everybody from the point of impact and below out and the surrounding buildings, but we had to sacrifice the people up above. For the first time in my firefighting career, first time in my life, I never felt so vulnerable that I was hopeless and useless. And at this point, people were waving an article of clothing from up above the point of impact, and I'm imagining that I can hear their voice saying, hurry up, come up here and get us, we can't take it no more. And then they just started jumping out of the building all around me. They'd come down like raindrops, and after a while I just couldn't take it no more. They would come down and just hit the street and just splat and disappear. And then at that point, I realized that we were going to lose a lot of people, and I didn't want to lose the ambulance crews that were setting up a treatment area in the lobbies. I said, you have to get out of the lobbies and go about 6 blocks away, stage your ambulances. We'll call you 1 crew at a time as when we need you. And this is why. What do we got to leave? This is a triage area. This is our treatment area. I said, no, you don't understand. These towers are going to collapse, all right? Because we're going to need you the most at the end of the day. Well, who the hell are you? You got no authority. We don't work for you. I said, no, you don't understand. You all of you, get your stuff now. I didn't say stuff. It's something else. Yeah. I said, get your stuff and get out of this building now. And so they were giving me a hard time, but they got out. And I was outside the South Tower, right underneath it, and I heard a loud rumble and a roar. I was sweating. I was hot. I was frustrated. I was angry. I was scared. I was confused. And I hear a loud rumble and a roar, and I look up, and here comes the South Tower. And I said to myself, you idiot. You're the one who knew this building was going to collapse, and you put yourself right underneath it. But I didn't think the collapse was going to happen until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I really thought we had 5 to 6 hours to get everybody out of the towers, and then they would come down. But the South Tower, the second building struck, was the first one to collapse in less than an hour. In 55 minutes, as I was underneath, it started coming down. I just started running as fast as I could. And I tried to make it underneath a footbridge that went over the main thoroughfare. And as I'm running, I'm just looking at that footbridge. I'm running as fast as I can. Now the building's coming down, what we call a pancake type of collapse. 110 stories hitting each floor below. Boom, 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 boom. And as each floor is hitting the floor below, It's puffing air out like a fireplace bellows. And I could feel the air on the back of my neck, but I just keep running. And the air pressure was getting stronger and stronger. It took my helmet off my head, and my helmet was flying through the air. It's flying faster than I'm running, and I just keep watching like the Wizard of Oz. And then they estimate that the air pressure was so strong. Somebody said 200 miles an hour. I don't know who estimated that, but it was like a tornado gust that picked me up from my feet, and I was flying through the air, and a piece of steel hit me in the back of the head and split the back of my head open. And huge slabs of concrete were just hitting my body. With every slab of concrete, more and more bones are breaking. Now I'm buried under the South Tower. I got a fractured skull. The back of my head split open. My ribs are broken. My arm is snapped in half. My neck and spine is crushed. I'm bleeding internally, and I'm suffocating in this darkness under this huge dust cloud. There was no air. There was no light. And I'm buried with all these other people, and they're all screaming at the top of their lungs, but we couldn't see each other. We were pinned under the steel and concrete. And after a while, those screams had turned into cries, cries into whimpers, whimpers into silence. One by one, they'd all died, and I was still breathing. And then I was in the middle of all these fires. And I actually was hoping I'd suffocate to death before I burnt to death. And then I had an image. I had this recollection 20 years before when I was sworn into the New York City Fire Department in January of 1981. I remember standing in front of the mayor and the fire commissioner with 124 other young guys. We had short haircuts, suits and ties. We had our right hand in the air taking the oath of office, saying that we'd be willing to lay down our life so that somebody else might live in the discharge of our duties in becoming a new fireman in New York City. You know, I kept on saying to myself, you never thought you'd live up to this vow, and today you're living up to it. And I did something I hadn't done in a long time, and I normally don't talk about this, but I went to 12 years of very strict Catholic schooling, and I kind of got away from religion for a while. I wasn't like a pagan or anything. I just didn't really fully grasp what I was being taught in the last 12 years. I couldn't really gravitate the meaning of religion for me, right? So I was kind of lost in this lonely place in spirituality, although I was always a Christian in my heart, more Christian than probably most priests are. But I was lost in some way. And I closed my eyes and I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I said a prayer. I didn't want to die angry. I actually thanked God for my career. I was accepting my fate. I knew that this was always something that I might have to live up to. I just asked God, take care of my family. Please take care of them. And then I had a vision of my 4 young kids. The night before, when I stopped by my old firehouse, Monday night on September 10th. I got home about 9 o'clock that night. I had been out speaking, doing a fire prevention seminar, and my wife let my 4 kids stay up late until I got home, knowing they would be in bed by 9 o'clock. And as soon as I walked through the door, they all came running. They grabbed me. They were pulling me. They said, Daddy, 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 you said when you came home tonight you were going to promise that we were going to set a date to go to Disney World. And as I'm laying underneath the building, I kept on saying to myself, why did I never ever take them to Disney World? That's the only thing they ever asked of me. Why did I ever wait? So I'm saying, you know what? 5 or 10 minutes from now is the end of my life. A new man's going to come into my wife's life. There'll be a new daddy taking them to Disney World. Why did I wait so long? And then I was losing consciousness. They found a void, and they found 4 of us, and they dug us out. And they put me on a long spine board, which is like a rigid stretcher, and they ran to the shoreline of the Hudson River that separates Manhattan from New Jersey. Boats had come from New Jersey into Manhattan to get people out of Manhattan. That's the only way you can get out. On the east side, you can run over bridges. On the west side, you had to get on a boat. There were no cars, no buses, no trains, no nothing. So they put me on the deck of a boat across the street from the towers. And I'm laying on the deck of the boat, and they're holding my head closed. And I heard them saying that I was going to die if I couldn't get to a hospital. And all of a sudden, there was another loud rumble and roar, and somebody on the boat started screaming, oh, my God, here comes the other building. Now the North Tower started collapsing and flew across the street towards the Hudson River, and millions of shards of glass are raining down on the deck of the boat. Boom. Everybody jumped overboard into the river and left me behind. And with a lucky swipe of my index finger, the release belt that was holding me down opened. This arm was snapped in half backwards, and I ripped the tape off of my neck, and I kind of just rolled off the stretcher. I couldn't see because my eyes were so damaged, and I felt the doorway, and I jumped into the doorway, but I ended up diving headfirst into the engine room 10 feet below, and now the North Tower buried the boat on the river, and I'm suffocating all over again, all by myself. And about an hour later, when I was losing consciousness, I heard banging on the deck of the boat. I heard voices, and somebody came into the engine room to start the motors, and they found me, and he screamed to the deck above. He says to the captain, Captain, there's a fireman down there. This guy, he looks like he's in bad shape. You better get down here." The captain shined the light, says, "Holy crap, this guy's in bad shape. We got to get this boat out of here." The boat starts skipping across the Hudson River, and it stopped, and I heard commotions. There were people, EMTs and paramedics on the Jersey side. They jumped onto the boat and came down with another stretcher into the engine room and got me out and put me in an ambulance, and I blacked out. And then I woke up maybe a half hour later. I was in an operating room, but I didn't know where I was. I was in another state. I was in New Jersey, cutting all my clothes off of me, stark naked. And we all write our name on the inside of our firefighting coat as a Tommy McNamara. So for 3 days, they didn't know where I was. I was declared dead for 3 days. And then the following morning on September 12th, when the sun came up again and the smoke was clearing, people realized that Superman isn't real, Batman and Robin isn't real, Spider-Man is not real. The only children's rescue hero who ever came to life was Billy Blazes on the morning of September 11th, when he would come to represent 343 firefighters who made the supreme sacrifice of their life and the greatest rescue effort ever witnessed in our lifetime, and left me behind to tell the story. Life in itself is never what we thought it would be. Life isn't always what we wanted it to be. That's the nature of life, right? So a lot of us face difficulties. Long before 9/11, I've been through so many difficulties in my life. When I was a teenager, I've navigated some tough times, not drugs, just emotional stuff, and I was in a deep, dark place in my adolescence for a reason I don't even know why. I struggled through this deep, dark place. It took a lot of years to come out from underneath it, but I learned a lot after going through that. I learned a lot about myself, right? So once again, life isn't always what we thought it would be. I've been on that roller coaster so many times in my life. I've been on the Ferris wheel. I've been on the merry-go-round. Life does that to us. But you know what? I tell people this here, and I want people to listen to this very closely. Whatever you're going through, okay, and whatever that might be, somebody else is going through it with you right now. You're never alone in anything you're going through. Whatever you're going through, somebody went through it, somebody's going through it, and somebody will go through it in the future. I do care what you're thinking and feeling, but what I'm trying to say is whatever you're thinking, whatever your emotions are telling you, whatever you're feeling, whatever you're confused about, somebody else has already been there and gotten through it, okay? Don't ever get to the point where you're going to surrender. You know what? You can't do something so rash, because some people turn around, they give up, and they have a long-term solution to a short-term problem. Life isn't what we always want it to be, but you know what? In the true spirit of what firefighters represent, we're going to keep pushing through. If you're ever walking through the fires of hell, just keep on walking, because you're never going to know your true strength until your weakest moment. And cowardice, right? Bravery is the coward that we let to escape from inside of us. And tomorrow, that sun that shines tomorrow morning, look at it, has no particular person's name on it. That sun is for every single person. It's the start of a new day, and it's a new beginning. And I know that when you go through life, sometimes people say, I wish I could start over again. I wish I could do things over. I wish I didn't make all these mistakes. I say this to myself all the time, because I made some huge mistakes in my life. But you know what? I look back now at my age, I'm 66 years old, and I look back and I say, you know what? There's no new beginning for me, but I can make a better ending. And that's what people should know. And so when you think all is lost, I want people to remember this most of all. There's a reason why the windshield in your car is much bigger than the rearview mirror. What lies ahead for you is going to be much more than anything you'll ever left behind, so don't ever give up.